This week, Ken Westin from Lima Charlie is with us to discuss confessions of a cyber criminal stalker. In the security news, fast cars kill people, Apple 0 days, memory safety, poisoning the well, babble, 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 and malware that tries really hard to be stealthy and I think accomplishes that goal. Palo Alto and Fortinet have some serious new vulnerabilities. Open source isn't free, but neither is commercial software. Get on the TPM bus, find URLs with stealth, stealing credentials with more Palo Alto and Fortinet, the first Zoom call ever, and one person's trash is another person's gaming PC. All that and more on this episode of Paul's Security Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network. It's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. Quick question. Do your end users always, and I mean always, without exception, work on company-owned devices and IT-approved apps? I didn't think so. So my next question is, how do you keep your company's data safe when it's sitting on all those unmanaged apps and devices? 1Password has an answer to this question. Extended Access Management. 1Password Extended Access Management helps you secure every sign-in for every app on every device because it solves the problems traditional IAM and MDM can't touch. Check it out at securityweekly.com/1Password.
Coming to you from Purgatory Studios in semi-high definition, compliments of Darth Vader himself, this is Paul's Security Weekly, episode number 852, being recorded on Wednesday, November 20th, 2024. I am Paul Asadorian, joined remotely by Mr. Bill Swearingen. Bill, welcome.
Hey, Paul. Glad to be back in Kansas City. I flew in last night, and boy, are my arms tired.
Wow, you've been waiting all day to say that joke, haven't you?
All day.
I really want to use a rim shot on him.
Mr. Josh Marpet is here with us. Josh, welcome.
Bill, no, please, no. You're not a comedian. Don't even try, okay? But yeah, it's a pleasure to be here.
Keep at it. Mr. Jeff Mann is here with us. Jeff, welcome.
Prepared to keep us all on track or not. Coming to you live from Baltimore, Maryland.
Yeah, Jeff, I had you in mind when I did the open source versus commercial software one for some, I don't know why. I thought that was one that you would have screaming children in the background while we covered it.
Bill, could you take care of your business?
That's not mine.
I don't know who that was.
That was Ken.
Oh, sorry, that was Ken.
Well, if that's the esteemed guest, so
yeah, no worries.
He can do what he wants.
So we're excited to welcome Ken Westin to the show, Senior Solutions Engineer from Lima Charlie. Ken Westin has been in cybersecurity for over 15 years, working with companies to improve their security posture through threat hunting, insider threat programs, and vulnerability research. In the past, he has worked closely with law enforcement to help unveil organized crime groups. His work has been featured in Wired, Forbes, New York Times, Good Morning America, and others, and is regularly reached out to as an expert in cybersecurity, cybercrime, and surveillance. Ken, welcome to Paul's Security Weekly.
Hi, Paul. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
It's nice to have you on the show today, Ken. How did you get your start in information security?
I get asked that a lot, and it's more, I kind of stumbled into it. I think like a lot of folks, I didn't really have like a cybersecurity program or education, anything like that at the time. Got really interested and more on the offensive security side around USB-based Trojans, and kind of went down a rabbit hole there, kind of started exploring it. Built a website around it too called usbhacks.com. That was the first time the FBI contacted me because I was uploading some of these malicious tools and things like that to educate administrators around how they can use them. And then kind of started using that to track stolen devices, had a startup around it too. And then, that failed, of course, and then went back into working for other companies, kind of building on what I learned.
So wait, how did you use USB devices to track stolen devices? or a similar concept?
Yeah. So back in, this was like 2005 or 2006 or so, there was a way of actually infecting networks from a USB thumb drive. You had auto run capabilities, things like that were in Windows XP, and those were exploited quite heavily. You probably always hear like, don't pick up random thumb drives from the parking lot at DEF CON and plug them into your computer, right?
Yeah, we have funny stories about that from ShmooCon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I kind of went down a rabbit hole. Like there was a lot of different ways to get them executed. So I had an agent that you would install on these devices. And then when you access the device, it would hijack the computer it's connected to. It would gather information about the network, the user, and then send it off to a centralized server. And then I would send that off to the owner of the device. I ended up having a 3-figure deal with a camera company called FLIR. They make thermal imaging cameras.
Yeah.
Where I actually embedded this agent. You would actually pay for it. And it was called Thermotrack at the time. And we even had it so that it would write it to the SD card. And if you removed it and put a new SD card in, it would actually, the firmware would look for it. If the agent wasn't deployed, it would redeploy it. And it was used for theft recovery purposes, but also for export controls. Some of these cameras were embargoed in certain countries because they can be used for nuclear purposes. And so they actually used it as well for sort of tracking road distributors. They couldn't tell me a lot of the details, but they said it was helpful in some of those cases.
No, that's pretty sweet. And then so you, after all that, well, somewhere in there you got involved in tracking criminals after that, right?
Yeah, well, I kind of went down a rabbit hole. Like it was more focused on theft recovery, and then from USB devices, I then moved into laptops. At that time, it just happened to be that most of the laptops started having cameras built in, and Wi-Fi positioning came out with the new iPhone. I was really interested in that technology because it didn't have a GPS chip. It was using Wi-Fi geolocation. So I actually contacted the company that developed that technology and said, "Hey, I have an idea when I want to use this for Macs." For recovering stolen devices. And so I would get a photo of the person that took your computer. I would also get geolocation within 10 to 20 meters of where they were. And it was sort of revolutionized sort of theft recovery at the time because back then you had, it was LoJack for laptops, which was a company that was actually up in Canada that had licensed the name. But it was
called LoJacks, right?
Yeah, it's called LoJack for laptops. Yeah, it was by Absolute Software.
They had Absolute Software. They had a BIOS implant or something. Eclipsium did the research on that.
Yeah, I had a lot of issues with that because it was basically provided them with a backdoor. They had a recovery team that were like ex-law enforcement folks, but you're basically providing them a backdoor into your computer. And so I preferred kind of my method where at the time I was just using Flickr. I didn't want to set up a server or anything like that. You would just set up a Flickr account and then it would send the information, the photo, private into your Flickr account. Later on, I built a server when I had some resources to do so securely. But through that, I ended up, working with law enforcement. At first, you tell them, hey, I have the location of a stolen laptop. They don't really care. But when I start saying, hey, it looks like there's, in the images I have, there's a bunch of other stolen property. And so a lot of these sort of fencing operations started getting discovered. We ended up solving everything from a violent carjacking. So we recovered stolen cars, weapons, all kinds of things as a result of that.
Turns out criminals, just don't want to steal laptops. They want to commit other crimes. And it seems like this was a conduit into those other crimes that they were committing, which then, of course, garnered law enforcement. Because I think if you call up law enforcement, like, hey, someone stole my laptop, they're like, well, that stinks. You should buy a new one, right? But if you've got images like, the image had piles of drugs and money behind them in the background, you might want to look into that. That's pretty much how it sounds like it played out.
Yeah, I mean, I got really into, especially like I had to get into more on the OS inside because I had situations where, we had recovered stolen devices and we would go in and all sorts of other things would be unveiled. But sometimes I would have to lay the case out for them. I would have to do some additional information. Like there was this one guy, the laptop was stolen in Portland and then 2 weeks went by, we didn't have it. And then I finally got pings and it was like, in a remote location. And then we found that it was actually these Russian organized crime groups where they'd actually swap stolen property in trucks. And it became, they would then, take it from Portland and then, Missouri, we had another operation that was recovered there. And it happened to be, there was this one laptop that the guy who was organizing it actually gave to his son that was stolen as a birthday present. And it unveiled this huge organized crime group. Probably over half a dozen people were arrested.
And was this a commercial, another commercial company, or like a segue from the code you put on the FLIR cameras?
It was my own. It was called Gadget Track at the time, and so it was just sort of an evolution. We then also got into mobile devices. So I actually had a distributed throughout a bunch of wireless carriers, all their demo units. It was kind of a fun company, but I didn't raise a lot of money in Portland. It was probably close to about $1 million that I'd raised. We ran it for about 5 years, but it just wasn't a viable business in the long run, especially, being in Portland versus the Bay Area.
Yeah. There was a lot of companies that were doing that detection capabilities on your mobile and laptop devices, right?
There was a few that kind of came along after that. There was like Orbicule. There was some others that sort of copied. So it got kind of crowded. And then I was trying to get into the mobile. And then without, Lookout Security, once they got like $30 million in funding, I was like, there's no way I could compete with that. It's game over. And at that time, I was almost bankrupt. So.
Gotcha. So then what'd you do after that? It sounds like you're still kind of interested in tracking criminals, because that you kind of stumbled upon criminals in the previous business.
Yeah. It was weird. It was kind of a low point in my life because like I was almost bankrupt and I know things were working out. And so I went to work for Tripwire. And it was amazing that basically all these things that I'd learned and also a lot of the media contacts I had, they kept reaching out to me. Like when the Sony breach happened, I ended up being like a talking head on Bloomberg because every time there was like something bad happened in cybersecurity realm, they would call me. Like had my own hashtag. My friends started calling me worst case Westin because anytime they saw me, it's like something bad happened. So, and so I was able to kind of leverage that, and I became sort of the right hand of the CTO. And then I got still interested in the OSN work. And then I was using Splunk quite a bit, and I was poached by Splunk to become one of their first security specialists that they were moving into security at the time. Because I really like the analytics side, logs and things like that. I even built ways of mining like EXIF data from images and things like that. And I was using tools like Splunk to do that kind of work, to be able to search it. So kind of from there, I kind of got into the SIN space, went into, EDR world. But a lot of it, kind of the common thing that I do is I try to understand the criminal mindset. Like how do they commit these crimes? How do they go about doing it? Whether it's ransomware, whether it's, insider trading, insider threat, things like that. Really kind of putting myself in that mindset of the criminal and how they actually do this work. And I think it really helps me on the defender side as well to better mitigate some of those threats.
And then, so what was one of the first kind of criminal investigations you got involved with at this point in your career again?
There was a lot of fun ones. One of them was the Portland school districts. They had a bunch of laptops that were being stolen. It was the weirdest thing. They think it was actually an insider because it was all these schools that would get hit, and then 2 weeks later they'd replace all the laptops, and then they get hit again. So we ended up, I worked with them. We actually set up my software and some bait laptops. And then those got stolen. And then we tracked it across the river in Vancouver, Washington. And it was this really kind of nasty Russian organized crime group. At first, the police went there and they went to the address that I gave. I said, it's within 10 to 20 meters, right? It's not going to be pinpoint. And he knocks on the door, and the detective there, it's the guy that works on his roof. It was just a coincidence. And so then he's like, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. You made me look stupid and blah, blah, blah. And I said, it's 10 to 20 meters. It's in that area. I got mad. So I went out there. I drove out there and I had my big ass Wi-Fi antenna because I'm sniffing the Wi-Fi networks to see, what was in there and the signal strength. And one of the Wi-Fi networks was this thing about Russian pride. And then I'm looking across, and right next to it was a duplex. Then they went to one side of it. On the other side, there's this car, and it has this big Russian pride bumper sticker on the back of it. And then I'm sitting there staring at it, like getting this signal, and out walks the guy that I have a photo of. And so
Oh boy,
it kind of freaked me out. I'm sitting there on my laptop making it look like I was looking for directions or something, right? With this big antenna stick out of my car. But I contacted the detectives, and they came out there, and finally they said, yeah, okay, we got though. And I thought I was going to have to testify. And this was, he said, yeah, these guys are really bad. I go, he goes, that guy's not bad. But the guy across the street, a friend of his, he just got out of jail for manslaughter. And I'm like, where my car was parked in front of his house.
Right.
Thanks,
Good
guys.
Lord.
And so they ended up busting them, and there was like 6 or 7 of them that ended up getting busted. And I thought I was going to have to go to trial, so I was a little nervous of people in Adidas tracksuits for a little while.
Right.
But they ended up getting them to turn on each other, so they all got them to think that they all ratted on each other, and so then I was just an anonymous informant. But they ended up busting 6 or 7 of them. So. It's still, there probably.
And hopefully they don't listen to this podcast and hold a grudge.
Yeah. You mean your friend did all those things? Your buddy did all,
Yeah, it's it's been quite a while, and they might know who it is, but hey, I've had other situations too where criminals have been targeting me recently, even, and there's only so much they can do without kind of unveiling who they are, and so like everything from trying to be swatted to whatever. There are things you can do to protect yourself, but at the end of the day, people are going to find out where you are, where you live, things like that.
Ken, you're very nonchalant about all this, dude. But like you're putting your own personal safety at risk to catch criminals, which I have nothing but admiration for you. Like I think that's great, and I don't want to downplay the risks that you take and the situations you put in to help bring these people to justice. Man, that's really awesome.
Yeah, I mean, you got to think about law enforcement and things like that. They put their lives out there every day too. So. Yeah, I mean, most of the stuff I do is pretty geeky and things, and its evidence is out there. I've done a lot of training for law enforcement and things too, like showing them how to use social media as a tool. I've even built some tools like how to get like EXIF data off of images and things like that easily without having to pull a full forensic image of the computer and things like that. So
yeah, Larry did some stuff back in the day with EXIF stuff. Largely though, once you upload it, it gets stripped. For the most part today. That wasn't always the case.
Yeah, right.
Now, right.
Yeah, that's another tool I'd built. It was actually a search engine to search the EXIF data. I found that it was really valuable to have that, and I found that a lot of the higher end cameras actually embedded the make and model of the serial number of the camera into the image, but there wasn't a way to search it. But I had a friend that had a startup that was sort of doing like it's sort of like SETI at home, but you would actually sell your idle computer time. And so you had access to various computer labs around the country. So I had about 500 computers at my disposal.
Nice.
And we ran a script and we mined like all of Flickr. I downloaded it was billions of images. It would have taken me years on a single computer, even AWS. But using this approach, we were able to mine basically all of Flickr at the time, all the EXIF data, and I had a database. And then you could search for it. It was a stolen camera thing where you put the serial number of the camera in and it'll show you all the photos I found. And it worked. We actually had a guy that had a camera stolen, and a year later he heard about the service, did a search with the serial number of his camera, found it. We traced it to a Facebook user, had a profile. It was another professional photographer, had the camera right there. The LAPD went in. And what happened was it was stolen from him on assignment, with like $7,000 worth of camera gear. And then that guy sold it to someone on Craigslist, and then that person sold it to someone on eBay. We tracked it all the way through, and the guy that bought it from someone on Craigslist, I still have the address. So the police went to this address, and sure enough, they go in and they find all sorts of stolen property still in this apartment. This guy was fencing all sorts of stolen property. It's kind of cool, like a little piece of information, the serial number of a camera, right? And this technology that didn't exist, a year prior, we're able to sort of solve these sort of crimes. I thought it was kind of fun.
So I'm really close to Missouri. You mentioned in the previous story that, there was some fencing operations within Missouri. So I wondering if you could give me that address, because I'd like to get some cheap stuff.
Well, it was interesting. I had so many photos of this guy. Like I had photos of him, and he was really into cars. That kind of helped me too, because then I was able to find the car things. He was actually a power seller on eBay. I think he was basically selling stolen car parts.
Wow.
But he posted a photo of his own car, and so I had his license plate number. Like I had stacks of information. We actually went to the district attorney, and they said even if they don't have the stolen laptop on them, this is enough for us to bust them for possession of stolen property, and kind of the first case that we actually had like that. So it was pretty interesting.
Where in the timeline does it take us next, Ken, to the things that you've investigated?
I really like investigating things, and so I started doing some more research around stolen credit cards when I was a tripwire. That was interesting, particularly when we had like the breach of Home Depot and things like that was happening at the time. I remember like a lot of the point shell malware.
Yeah, that was like Pandora's box, right? I remember, Jeff works in PCI world, and I remember reading the book about Max Vision, and it unfolds in that timeline when credit cards were the thing that attackers were after, right? And kind of was around that time frame of the TJX Home Depot kind of breaches, right?
Yeah.
Well, those are two different time periods, Paul.
Are they two different? TJX was earlier, right? Home Depot
Yeah,
was later?
TJX was like 2007, 8-ish, and Home Depot was like 13, 14, somewhere in that range. Home Depot and Target were together. TJX was TJX and Hannaford and allegedly a few other department store type companies.
I don't remember the time frame of when Max went to prison, but that was like at the peak of, because then when he got out after the next time, the landscape had kind of shifted, right? It's a great book. Anyway, that was like big back then in the time frames we're talking about, right? That 2005 to 2013-ish time frame.
Yeah, something like that. And it was like I was really looking in like a lot of the underground markets, like in Tor and Hidden Services, and a lot of these forums that were sharing and selling these credit cards. That was interesting to me. But then I stumbled into one of these forums, and they're talking about insider information. And so they were actually looking for people that are inside companies that would be willing to share things like earnings reports or FDA approvals for pharmaceuticals and things like that. And I was like, this is genius. Like, this is a great way to make a lot of money. You get this non-public information. And so I started researching it. I did a bunch of presentations around this. And probably around 2018, I go, this is a really big deal. And I actually went through a bunch of cases that have been prosecuted. There was one where it was this fellow organized it. He was actually a former VP of Morgan Stanley. And he was working with these sort of criminal hackers, some of them in Ukraine and Russia. And they would have gotten away with it. They made over $100 million. He actually made like over $20 million in these illicit trades. And they would have gotten away with it. They were doing this for over 4 years. But one of the criminals that were involved was getting involved in stolen credit cards. And the police in Ukraine went in and they confiscated his laptop. And on his laptop was basically a PowerPoint presentation and videos and all this stuff that they'd set the server up where they were stealing press releases from these PR firms about earnings reports. And like you could buy access for like $10,000 to this service that they had. But there was like tons of illicit trades, and like kind of the white collar criminal guy from Morgan Stanley, he was the one that sort of orchestrated all this. He even set up trading accounts for these folks, and they just made a ton of money. He ended up going to jail for like 5 years.
It was basically insider trading, Ken? Was that the...
Yes. Yeah, yeah.
Theft of material, non-public information, and then usage of it for insider trading.
Yep. Yeah, there was an earlier case before that, and there was a guy that was busted, and he'd invested $42,000 in one stock. First time he'd ever invested. He was in Russia, and he got like $300,000, and the brokerage, like they shut his account down, reported to the SEC, and he was stealing this non-public information, and then. They tried him, but they didn't try him for insider threat because at that time, insider threat was defined as having to have a fiduciary duty to that organization. So you'd actually have to be an insider, like a CFO or something like that. And so as a result of that case, they actually changed those rules, and I think they call it outsider trading now or something silly like that. But around
was that the FSB? Was that the FSB agent?
That was later. So
Okay.
I did a presentation around this around 2018. I said this is a bigger issue. Like, we got lucky with catching these guys. And then there was another guy that was involved with this. He had a company called M13. He was providing services. He was actually colluding with a former FSB intelligence officer. They made over $100 million in these illicit trades, and they were compromising all these everything from legal firms to you name it. And he was actually arrested on a trip to Switzerland. And then he was exchanging a prison swap recently with Russia. So he's now, living his best life, but he made a lot of money and he's pretty good friends with Putin.
Was it a U.S. prisoner swap?
Yeah, I think they got a journalist and goes, can't remember what publication
They got
it was
someone
from.
out. Yeah, okay.
So but it's kind of interesting how sort of entrenched they are and how much money they're making. I think there's a lot more of that happening. I need to say it, probably more than we would like to even think about.
You mean insider trading based on?
Yeah.
Is it cyber crimes that are accessing the information, or is it insiders, or both?
It can be a little bit of both. I think a lot of it can be. You think about all these ransomware hits, right? Not only are they, encrypting the data, they're also backing that up.
Stealing it, yeah.
Right. So they have access. I'm sure they see, hey, this is an earnings report or something like that. I'm sure they can disseminate that to the right people. But I mean, the fact that they were able to make so much money and the risk is actually fairly low. The FSB folks, they got caught because they were doing big transactions. The prior org with the VP from Morgan Stanley, they were able to avoid raising red flags because they did smaller transactions. It didn't raise any red flags with the SEC. I should say also one of those folks.
Wait, you mean they watched Office Space and they were like, we're going to do smaller transactions so no one catches it?
Well, one of those guys, he actually also targeted the SEC themselves. He actually compromised it was like a dev server. And he was able to get in there and yeah, it was pretty nasty. So he's probably not going to be coming to the US anytime soon. He's been found guilty of a number of crimes but yeah, he'll probably never, see the inside of a jail though.
That's and so you think that stuff's still going on today, Ken?
Oh, it has to be. Hopefully they're, hopefully, but like they're probably smarter about it. They're probably doing smaller transactions, but it's a fine line between someone that's lucky and someone that knows what they're doing.
Congress is the only people that should be doing insider trading. Okay, let's be clear on this.
Don't get me started on that one. That's another, it's frustrating that they can do it, but we can't. But I don't know.
Yeah, I wonder. So, like, I definitely think that the insider trading is going to forever be an issue, and and I've worked for companies that they handled press releases too, and those were constantly attacked. But I wonder, like, so I wonder, worst case Westin, like, do you think that the shift to like where does cryptocurrency come into that? And like when we start looking at fencing and just money, just commerce, finance, do you think it's has that shifted the kind of the operations of those types of adversaries?
Well, yeah, I think North Korea in particular were smart when they started targeting cryptocurrency. A lot of times people were moving that. I found like a lot of, particularly when you started looking at white collar criminals, right? They started migrating to more cryptocurrencies. That's where they started finding some of these folks in some of these underground forums and things like that. But I think North Korea is the one that really took advantage of that, targeting some of the crypto exchanges, going after the wallets and things like that. It's a lot of people have lost a lot of money as a result of that because, it's not insured. All right. You lose that, that money's gone.
Yep.
It's not coming back. So, it definitely raises another dimension to it and actually makes it a little bit easier for criminals.
Ken, speaking of, we talked about you actually visiting Russian criminal's house and sitting outside of it, which is that's frightening.
Yeah, next time take me, man. Like that sounds awesome.
It sounds exciting, right?
I'd go.
But also, you've received some blowback online from this. What is that? What does that stem from? So it's not just you putting yourself at risk by being around actual criminals, but online you've received some harassment. What's that about?
It's a little bit different. That one I've sort of unveiled some disinformation, particularly around like mercenary spyware and things like that, and some rather kind of bad people, right, that are kind of profiting from that. They're not real happy with it.
First, let's define mercenary spyware. I love that. That sounds like a fascinating term.
Well, Pegasus spyware, so from like the NSO group. So they've been blacklisted by the U.S. government because they were using the spyware not against like the terrorists and things like that they advertised, but it was actually being used against political dissidents, journalists.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say like Mexico and other countries used it against journalists in their country, right? That was big.
Yeah,
Is that Citizen Lab that disclosed that?
Yep, Citizen Lab and Amnesty International. They did a great job sort of exposing that. But their NSO group's been trying to get themselves off the blacklist. They've been lobbying politicians, but there's also been nations that have been kind of had their reputations hurt by this, and so they purchased the spyware. They used it in ways they shouldn't have, and then they tried to basically say that they never used it. They're tried to say Amnesty International, Citizen Lab, they made this up and it's bad science and all this other stuff. And they've even gotten some lawyers to go to Morocco to back this stuff up, and it's all nasty stuff. So it kind of, speaking out against that, I was doing that sort of anonymously, and then I sort of doxed myself because a lot of people were being accused of being me. They're posting photos of their kids online, like really nasty stuff. And so I sort of doxed myself, said who I was, and they've then been coming after me.
So wait, but you doxed yourself, to use your term, Ken, because all the bad criminal actors or whoever thought that other people were you and they were suffering harm.
Yes.
And you're like, no. Like, come at me, bro. Don't go after those people. You're like a really nice person, Ken. I feel like I'm not as nice a person as you. I need to up my game.
I mean, you're not.
Well, it was attesting to this.
It was sort of a silly thing originally because I never actually planned on being anonymous and all this sort of thing. It was just sort of funny. Like pretty much everyone in InfoSec knew who I was. Like in High Fives, DEF CON, things like that. You kind of all, as a community, we were kind of fighting against these types of people. I mean, they were harassing women. They were going after all kinds of people.
But wait, so the group that was harassing you is harassing people who were trying to say that, like, countries that bought Pegasus spyware were doing bad things. This is where all this is stemming from, right?
Like even like security researchers that that validated Citizen Lab's work, Amnesty,
right?
Like anyone that would go against their research, to saying it wasn't scientific, then they would make very personal attacks. They would call people's employers. My employer's been called. They try there's like 3 or 4 of them that tried to get me fired from my current job. It's really.
No, wait, were any of those successful?
No.
Okay, so that's great. You had a good relationship because your boss is like, yeah, we know, and you're like, yeah. So I'm trying to do the right thing, and people are after me, and that's the deal. And your employer is cool with that. I love that.
Yeah,
he may be a jackass, but he's our jackass.
There's been other companies that have dealt with this too. These same people, so that was helpful too because I was able to show that there is a pattern to this, and the things that were.
So it's the same people that are going after security folks and others that are basically speaking the truth and going.
Yep.
And it's all stemming from the Pegasus usage of the Pegasus software?
I don't know if it's like Pegasus themselves. It's more people that are like working sort of in disinformation realm for the countries that were using the spyware.
Oh, I see.
They were hiring some of these people to do these sort of hit jobs
like a
and
thing.
things. Yeah.
Right, because we talk about Chinese threat actors and all the typhoons that got labeled, but then companies put out propaganda essentially on behalf of China. It's like, no, the U.S. government's making all that stuff up. China's not hacking anyone. What are you talking about? Yeah. So I see this game is in a different.
Some of them are like
arena.
they call themselves think tanks, or like some of them have academics and things like that, and like they're basically paid disinformation actors to try to especially in social media now. Yeah.
They want to discredit our work and the work of others that are. Uncovering these bad things that other governments are doing, right?
Yeah, I mean, they targeted me. They went on LinkedIn. They said that I had child porn on my computer. They've called other people pedophiles, like all these sorts of things that are just pretty over the top. So I mean, I just send this information to the FBI. Sent it all over to them, so they have a record of it all too. And so they have more resources available to investigate it than I do. But most of these folks are really low level people. I mean, they're living in basements. Like 2 of them I've tracked. They're living with their parents still. They're my age, and like they just really are kind of failures in life, and this is all they have. It's the only way they can, get any
because
sort of
some other government is basically paying them to spread this disinformation campaign.
Yep.
Yeah, they're paying the trolls. I didn't know troll was like a paid position. That's interesting to put it that way.
Apparently, it can be. Ken, I've got a question for you. Based on the fact that you have some major opposition, what's your threat model, your personal threat model, look like?
Don't want to give too much away, but
No, of course not.
Having a few different residences that I can go to, right? So I'm rarely am I in one place at any one time. I travel quite a bit. Done a lot to kind of scrub a lot of my information off the internet.
Good.
I've been in the media and things like that quite a bit, so there's a lot of articles and things like that. But like trying to get my address removed from, at least make it a little bit harder for them. You can probably find it, no problem, if you really try hard. But I think if you kind of make things a little more difficult for them, but then also I talked to my local law enforcement as well when they were trying to swat me. I went in and explained the situation. I had to explain to them, like if I am. There's an incident like this, call me at this number. So at least there's a record of that too. So it's not like a surprise.
Were you actually swatted, Ken? Or
no, they tried, but I was actually outside. I was away at the time. I was actually on a business trip. And they tried to do this thing on Twitter where, they said that I was having a mental breakdown, that people should call law enforcement. I might have a gun, that sort of thing. And that's how they try to get you swatted, to get people to come out there and basically harass you.
But you weren't home. And
but
so
I did call the police and explain to them what was happening.
Before the police went to your house? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and at that time, they didn't know specifically where I lived. They kind of knew my general area, so they didn't know my the specific police department to call.
Oh, I see. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah,
so
that's weird,
so what's
dude.
happening to these people now? Did you have we doxed them? Have we put anything out about?
Oh yeah, well that's part of it too. Is that some of them thought they were anonymous, and I exposed who they were, and they weren't too happy about that. And yeah, they kind of all collude together, and that's where like there are 3 or 4 of them that tried to do this against me. But it's really minor and petty. I mean, these folks, at least, I mean, they're not going to pay like a hitman or anything like that. It's more just to harass me, to try to intimidate me, things like that. So it's nothing like what I've dealt with in the past. I was actually concerned about someone showing up at my door or something like that.
So where do we stand now with these folks?
Still ongoing. So yeah, there's again, all the information gets sent to the FBI. A lot of times they're not going to tell you what's happening, but there's a larger disinformation network that I've shared with them as well. So it's not just tied to these individuals. There's multiple people and multiple organizations that are involved. But I think it's a harder thing to try to, is like you go through, this harassment, things like that. At what point does it cross the line? At what point is it actually illegal? Some of the harassment, unfortunately, is like a lot of the laws and things like that law enforcement really can't do anything.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, it's frustrating.
That really frustrates me too. And I'm sure you've listened to Darknet Diaries that has delved into these areas. And there are certain things that stick out in my mind from the stories that have been told on the show. Then is the ordering the pizza as a form of harassment, right? And law enforcement just can't do anything. And then there's the delivery of empty packages from USPS. I don't know if they put some kind of a stop on that, but that's another kind of form of harassment where you get like 1,000 or 2,000 empty boxes delivered to your house.
Yeah.
As part of the harassment.
Yeah, there's like they'll do some of that too, like validate addresses and things like that too. So yeah, it's a lot of it's just petty stuff that's just kind of noisy, but it does suck that you kind of have to feel like you have to watch your back.
But law enforcement can't do much about, the harassment. Is that still true today?
It depends on the level, right? If there's like a direct threat to your life or something like that, that's fine. But if it's just people calling you or whatever, sending emails, contacting your employer, things like that. Unfortunately, there are laws that protect you. Like in California, they have them. Like if someone like a stalker calls your employer and tries to get you fired, there are protections that you have in place. But
that's only at a state level, because I've heard other cases where that has happened as well.
Yeah. Like that's kind of the way I see it is, trying to get me fired. That's the only thing they can do. That's the only thing that they think they can actually do. Mm-hmm. And it was obvious that it was just the insane stuff that they were sending over. It was all various types of things. They tried to say that I sexually assaulted someone at DEF CON. They tried to start all these kind of rumors and stuff. And yeah, just no one believes them. And then they just kind of like they delete that account and then move on to the next thing.
Not for nothing. It's kind of a lame disinformation campaign. Now they're going to come after me, whatever. But like, it is kind of lame, right?
So I got a question for you, Ken. I mean, based on your experience with this broad variety of people and groups and whatever, how big do you think that universe is? I know it's rough. I'm just kind of curious what your thoughts are.
Oh, it's massive. I think there is a lot of foreign money that's flowing into think tanks. They target like academics and things like that to write these sort of papers and to back up their view and their perspective. And they're also lobbying politicians. So there's a lot of money into this. And you're supposed to, if you're doing any sort of foreign lobbying, you have to register with FARA. But there was like 2 people I've identified that haven't registered with FARA that are heavily involved in this. Recently, they've targeted me. They did this one of them did like a 2-hour long interview where they were just talking smack about me. It was just, but it was so low production and such poor quality and like no fact checking at all that, no one will ever see it. I think it had like 6 likes and then it was shared with the network. But
they do like a YouTube video where they did like a air quotes like podcast or whatever interview and talk smack about you?
One of them was a journalist. She blames me for getting her Twitter account removed, but she was involved in disinformation. She works for various countries. They pay her, from what I can tell, these sort of authoritative
bogus
regimes.
articles.
Yeah,
right?
write articles.
Write books. Yeah.
Their position, get it out there, and then she also gets quoted in a lot of like real media as well.
Because real media doesn't fact check.
Right.
I mean, we don't really fact check either, but I mean, sometimes we do. But we go fact check on the internet where you could find anything to support your facts. So there's that.
Yeah, but we saw that there was actually some bot manipulation on her account. So she would post something and then like it would get liked and like by like thousands of these accounts, and it was obvious bot activity. And I think that's why her account got suspended. She was completely banned from it. And so but she blamed me for it for some reason. And so that's why she's angry. And she interviewed this other person that's been targeting me. Very nasty person. Just this really low level slime person that's really been like targeting me and my employer. And I gave him a platform, but he has no experience.
She was like, "Wait,
anything.
the journalist was like, wait, you're my enemy, so I'm going to go find other enemies. Then we're going to get together and we're going to do disinformation together."
But in the interview, like he started naming names too of basically all the people that I've exposed, and basically all he did was show that it was collusion with the whole group of them. So yeah, it's silly stuff, really.
Dude, that's crazy. So what of your recent presentations at DEF CON? Are you basically talking about this stuff when you give your DEF CON presentations?
Yeah, like my last DEF CON talk was a while ago. It was Confessions of a Professional Cyber Stalker, where I talked about tracking criminals. That was in like DEF CON 23, so it's been a decade ago. And then I did some stuff around the black hat and white collar criminals with the insider trading. And then more recently, I did a talk more around the business of ransomware. I talked more about, and we always talk about the technical aspects of it, but kind of digging deeper into how the ransomware groups sort of mirror a legitimate company. Like how they handle their sales, the marketing, their software development life cycles. It's on par with what you'd see in the Bay Area, right, with a tech startup. So really,
does that mean it sucks or it's actually pretty good?
It's pretty good, actually. Like some of the groups.
So it doesn't really rival real companies.
Right.
It may actually exceed.
They're not running Windows 7 or whatever,
Yeah, it's even better, actually. I found that some of these ransomware groups, they even buy some of the, the EDR tools. So they'll buy the CrowdStrikes, the Sentinel ones, and things like that.
Yep.
And actually, test their kit against it. And they buy those again through like sort of rogue sort of distributors and things like that.
Well, I mean, they have arms in different countries, so they'll have their Ukrainian arm, they'll have their Estonian, Georgian, whatever. And they'll have them buy them there for a totally legitimate company that does a little business with somebody a little grayer than not, if you know what I mean. Yeah. And I mean, you know that VirusTotal, the most avid users of VirusTotal are the malware writers. Yeah, I mean, same vein of ideas there. So, okay, So you've been watching the bad guys for how long now?
I've been at this probably about 15 years or so now in cybersecurity. Oh.
So how old do you feel? 60, 70, 80? Anyway.
Yeah, I feel old, man. I'm almost 50. So it's like, and I'm not sure how that happened. It's like one day you wake up and it's like, now I'm the old guy here. Like, but
yeah, tell me about it.
Yeah.
Tell me, well,
That's why we keep Jeff around, so we never truly feel like the old person.
You're not old.
it's true. It's
Love
true.
you, Jeff. I'm just
15 years in the business. I'm thinking you're a baby. But whatever.
But Ken, predict the future.
Yeah, well, it's going to get pretty rough. I think one thing I'm sort of concerned about is the relationship, with Russia and things like that. Are they going to become much more emboldened? I think particularly as the geopolitical conflicts become more heated. I think we used to saw ransomware groups ask for a code of ethics where they wouldn't go after schools and critical infrastructure, and like those gloves are off now. It's almost like a patriotic duty for them to cause harm and damage our systems. And I think not just like, we think about ICS and attacks like that, but I think the major target is our financial system. We've already seen it with like the insider trading, FSB agents that are involved in this stuff. They're making a lot of money from it. The oligarchs are. That's a big concern of mine. And there's just so much money in it that, it's not going to go anywhere soon. If anything, they're just going to get more advanced. As soon as you find like a way to patch something, like with credit cards, stolen credit cards, they weren't worth as much because there was a lot more fraud mitigations that were put in place. But they're always going to find a new way. I think the sextortion stuff really scares me. The stuff that's targeting kids and things like that. I actually had a friend of mine that reached out to me to help them with that. And these people are just like, there's no ethics, no morals. Like these are complete dirtbags that we're dealing with that are targeting kids. And kids are killing themselves as a result of this, right? So where, they trick them into sending them an intimate image of themselves. They think they're maybe talking to a cute girl or something like that. And then they use those images and they say, if you don't give me X amount of money, I'm going to, put this on Facebook or Instagram and everyone's going to see this. And, kids, they get scared by that, and there have been suicides as a result of that because of the shame and things like that. They can't talk to their parents about it.
That's so disgusting, right? It makes you just want to reach out over the internet and grab these people and bring them to justice, right? Like,
yeah, and like, but they make money at it, and like that's where there's money, usually it's a gold rush, right? And so more people kind of flow into that. So
it's nothing personal; it's just business,
right? Yeah.
From their perspective,
that's probably how they're justifying it to themselves, Jeff. But
absolutely,
to use Ken words, they're still scum of the earth.
So that was a lot of doom and gloom there. Worst case,
yeah.
Now
you're living up to your nickname,
for sure.
Ken.
So, but I'm curious. There is a flip side of that. So, so talking to our listeners, what are some tips and tricks to get into, like what you're doing? Like, so, say that your kid is going through that scenario or whatever. Like, kind of talk that through. Like, what are those tools or those tricks or tips or whatever you have to how like the OSINT or
make Bill feel better.
Hey,
please.
That's right.
Well, I think open communication, like with first of all, I think parents need to be aware of this sort of thing. I don't think a lot of parents are aware that this type of activity is happening. A lot of times, I hate to say it, but they don't really put any sort of barriers on social media and things like that. They think that the social media platforms will protect my kid, and unfortunately, in a lot of these cases, they're not. If it's going to eat away at their profits in any way, then social media companies aren't going to do anything about it, unfortunately.
All of these cases, Ken, let's be honest, they don't do squat to protect children. As a matter of fact, they make them more exposed.
You're right.
Pun not intended. They make them more vulnerable.
Definitely.
To these horrible, disgusting, nasty.
Hey, we're trying to do positive right here, Josh. Come on.
But I think
thanks, Bill. Thanks, Bill, for keeping us on the positive track.
But
that was positive.
Parents, I think schools and things like that. I think they should educate parents around this. I think, I had a conversation with my own son when I said, "Hey, same thing when he gets to the age where you might be drinking." I'm like, "Look, if you're ever in a situation where you need me to pick you up, you've been drinking, I'm going to pick you up, no questions asked. I'm not going to. You're not going to." be punished. I'm not going to say anything the next day. I just want you home safe. And it needs to be the same thing with social media. We need to say, hey, there's these types of threats that are out there. If you ever are in this type of situation, let me know. Like, again, you're not going to be punished. I know you're going to be shamed or whatever related to it. But I think, that's kind of open communication can help. But, still a lot of kids don't have that kind of communication with their family.
I've always advised my kids and immediate family, especially because unfortunately they spend the most time with me. And I'm like, look, every communication you get from the internet is a lie. You need to go into it with every communication you get is a lie. And then I reinforce that with every time they ask me a question, I'm like, what's rule one? And they're like, oh,
I thought you were going to say you're lying to them.
That person's lying to me on the internet, Dad. I'm like, because everything on the internet is a lie. You got to go into it with, they're just lying to you. And that served us well. So they've now built up a skepticism about the information that they gather and communications they get over the internet. And they're like, oh, yeah, like I get it now. So I've instilled in them that, I mean, it's a little bit of paranoia, but it's more, I don't like to think of it as paranoia more so than verify and then trust is what have I instilled on my family. And I think those are pretty kind of easy concepts to distill to people, but it has to be like constant reinforcement, right? And constant lessons and learning, because you can easily let your guard down if you don't have that constant reinforcement.
So what about like the aspiring researcher? Are there any specific tools or techniques or, so like you have a phone number or, somebody's been interacting with you, like where do you kind of start? Where, how do they kind of start running that, that investigation?
Yeah, I think one thing in InfoSec in particular that I think a lot of people overlook is the community, right? Especially with security, like when you have those trust established with your friends, like at DEF CON, right? Every time we go, it's like, high school reunion. But those sort of
that's the only reason I go anymore. I mean, that's the reason why I go is family reunion. That's why I go.
Yeah. I mean, you go to DEF CON, I mean, the best source of threat intelligence is the person next to you. And actually having those real in-person communications and those contacts, I think are critically important. Like maybe it's just me, but it used to be when I was younger, like I couldn't wait to get online when I get off work. Like that's when I want to go play games and all this stuff. Now, as I get older, I want to spend more time offline. I want to, it's more time I could spend offline. I'm healthier mentally, everything. But I think also like having those network of friends of real people that that you can trust. They've been a huge help for me. And over the last few years, especially like these harassment cases and things like that, it's a large network of folks that are like, I just happen to be like the talking head that, that runs that account. But, on the back end, there's tons of people that are helping me and supporting me. And I think relying on that too, like to learn new skills, things like that are also critically important. You can Google things, but sometimes it's helpful to have mentors or people that you can reach out to. Like, here's the problem I'm trying to solve. Probably one of my best bosses I ever had was at an EDR company. He actually worked for the Israeli Defense Force. He actually set up a lot of the offensive infrastructure. And he was the kindest, most patient boss I ever had in my life. But he would never tell me the answer when I asked him a question. He would instead direct me into where I might go find the answer, particularly around offensive security stuff, right? Don't give me the exploit. Go show me where maybe I might find some of those clues. And then from that, I got better at it as well. Now I do my own research. I can go find that information, right? So he taught me a really valuable skill as a result of that.
For sure. And I had a question, I lost it, and then because I started thinking about how great like your boss was, right, for doing that for you. Because I had mentors early in my career that did the same thing, which I think is great. I did have a note. So what was your most recent presentation, Ken?
The last one was ransomware as a business. I did that at GERCON.
GERCON, just like the one we were at, and like somehow we didn't meet each other in person.
Oh
yep,
man!
Probably, yep.
Paul and I were both there. Damn it.
I was there.
Yeah, it was a fun one. So, and then I did another.
No, you were not.
I've been doing workshops lately. I did one at B-Sides Portland. It's roll your own EDR. It's using
cool.
open source tools and Lima Charlie. We have a free tier, showing people how to set up, their own EDR tools, how to write basic detections, how to deploy things like Sysmon onto Windows systems, and build their own sort of EDR lab as well.
Oh, I know I did ask you. OSINT. I feel like I get rusty. Like my OSINT goes like a graph of like waves, right? If I spend time on it, I get really good at it, but then like it really quickly drops off because if I take some time off from it, I feel like everything is different. And I'm like, I used to be able to find out everything about someone like so easily. Now I'm like, crap. I got like soccer games. I got a day job. I got podcasts. I'm like, now I got to get back up to speed on that. What are your tips for keeping up with this, Ken? Because we all know it's possible. I think so many of us have done it over time, gotten good at it at one point, perhaps, but it's not like our main focus. And then we try and go back to it. I'm like, oh yeah, like all the websites and techniques have completely changed since the last time, which is fine. But I'm like, I'm pressed for time. I need to find this person now because I need to like, it's usually something stupid. I need to embarrass someone, my kid's dating someone. Like it's something stupid, right? You're using it for way better things than what I'm using it for. But how do you keep up?
There's a lot of good resources. I mean, I just presented recently at the SANS OSID Summit where I talked about a lot more of these cases. That's a really good resource. There's a lot of videos that they have that are available for free to kind of walk through some of the newer techniques. Some of them are starting to use AI and like LLMs for some of the OSN work and too, which was really neat to see. But for me, like the only way I actually learn is to actually do something. So I like for learning some sort of defensive skill, I have to set up a lab and I have to attack it. And I have to look at the logs that get generated from it, right? So I think the more real you can make those sort of scenarios, the better. And then again, OSINT as well is like, okay, what am I trying to find about this person? Like what data sources might I be able to access? And you're going to hit roadblocks. For me, like I go down those rabbit holes. Sometimes I would be up for 2 or 3 days working on something that I thought was possible. Like I know I can get this done, and then you finally have that breakthrough, and it's like it's amazing. And sure, you look like you haven't showered for a week and whatever, but I know for me, like actually getting into the thick of things, actually throwing yourself into an investigation or something like that. For me, that's really the only way I can learn is by doing.
Yeah, so you got to put the time in. So there's no real shortcuts, right? You got to put anything else. You got to put the time in. I get that.
Or a credit card. I mean, a lot of the the data brokers and things like that. If you want to find information about a person, now the best hacking tool is a credit card.
Ken, we just have 5 questions left for you. Are you ready to play 5 questions with Security Weekly?
Oh boy, we'll see. Let's go.
3 words to describe yourself.
Funny, creative technologist.
If you were a serial killer, what would be your weapon of choice?
Probably a knife.
I was going to say, or his kid's violin.
Sorry about that.
No,
My wife teaches violin.
don't
downstairs.
apologize, man. It's awesome. Yeah.
That's great. If you wrote a book about yourself, what would the title be?
Confessions of a Professional Cyber Stalker.
What is your favorite hacker movie?
Get it right. Get it right.
The girl with the dragon tattoo.
I love that.
That's awesome answer.
Yeah. Choose 2 celebrities to be your parents.
Live, dead, something or otherwise.
Fictional or otherwise.
Fictional
Thank you,
or
Bill.
otherwise.
Live, dead, fictional, or otherwise.
Oh gosh. I want someone. I don't know. Liam Neeson and
I have a particular set of skills.
Liam Neeson and Angelina Jolie. How's that?
Most popular answer for mom for some reason.
I wonder why.
There's a research project about the psychology behind the 5 questions that will be my talk in retirement years, I think. Right? I'll go listen to all the answers to the 5 questions and I'll do it.
I think it has something to do with Freud or something. I don't know.
Or she was in Hackers. It could be. That's part of it. Yeah. Ken, thank you so much for appearing on Paul Security Weekly. It was wonderful talking with you, man.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
With that, we will take a short commercial break and come back with the security news. Stay tuned.